In a world where energy determines diplomacy, inflation, and the survival of governments, one of the most powerful players is almost invisible on the map. A peninsula jutting into the Persian Gulf, a population smaller than many global cities. And yet, this state controls roughly a quarter of the world's liquefied natural gas supply. Qatar. Here's what nobody tells you. Modern power no longer belongs only to those with the biggest armies or the largest economies. It belongs to those who control flexibility. And in an era where pipelines can be shut, sanctioned, or blown apart, LNG has become the most flexible energy on Earth. Here's why this matters. When crises erupt, the countries that can redirect energy at sea decide who freezes, who pays, and who survives. This is where the pattern begins. Qatar's rise was not inevitable. In the 1970s, the country was poor, sparsely populated, and largely ignored. Oil existed, but not at the scale of regional giants. Then came a discovery that quietly changed everything. Beneath the waters shared with Iran lay the North Field, the largest natural gas field ever found. Trillions of cubic feet of gas, too much to ignore, but too remote and expensive to monetize easily at the time. Most producers would have waited. Qatar made a different bet. Instead of pipelines, Qatar chose ships. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, liquefied natural gas was considered risky, niche, and expensive. It required cooling gas to minus 162 degrees Celsius, building massive liquefaction plants, specialized tankers, and import terminals on the other end. Many analysts doubted demand would justify the cost. But Qatar understood something others didn't. Pipelines lock you into politics. Ships give you options, not land, sea. Let me show you exactly how this decision rewired global energy power. By the mid-1990s, Qatar had begun building LNG trains at Ras Laffan, one of the largest energy complexes on Earth. The investments were enormous, the timelines long, but once operational, something remarkable happened. Qatar could sell gas to Japan, South Korea, Europe, or anywhere with a terminal. No transit states, no choke point politics, no single buyer dependency. The gas moved where prices were highest and demand was strongest. Flexibility became leverage. At first, it looked like a miracle. Revenues surged. Living standards exploded. Doha transformed from a small port into a global capital of finance, diplomacy, and influence. Then the bill arrived. Not for Qatar, but for the world that realized it had underestimated what flexibility meant. The early tests came quietly. Asian demand surged in the 2000s. LNG prices rose, Qatar delivered. Long-term contracts anchored supply while spot cargoes filled gaps. When financial crises hit in 2008, energy demand collapsed elsewhere. But LNG shipments could be rerouted. Losses were contained. The model worked, but the real demonstration of power came later. In 2011, Fukushima went dark. Japan shut down nuclear reactors almost overnight. Gas demand exploded. LNG prices spiked. Many suppliers struggled to respond. Qatar didn't. Cargoes shifted east. Contracts flexed. Japan paid more, but it got gas. Others didn't. Everyone thought they were safe. They weren't. The danger wasn't what they saw. It was what they ignored. The ability to move energy instantly across oceans is more powerful than owning the resource itself. Then came Europe's reckoning. For decades, Europe had built its energy system around pipelines, cheap, fixed, and politically assumed to be stable. When Russian gas faltered after 2022, Europe faced a brutal reality. Pipelines don't reroute. LNG does. And suddenly, the world's phone lines lit up, not in Moscow or Riyadh, but in Doha. Here's why this matters. LNG is the only large-scale fossil energy that can be redirected mid-journey. A tanker bound for Asia can turn toward Europe. A shipment priced for one market can be sold into another. This optionality creates a quiet hierarchy. Countries without LNG terminals have no seat at the table. Countries without supply flexibility have no leverage. And countries that control LNG capacity sit at the center of crisis response. This is where Qatar's influence became unmistakable. By the early 2020s, Qatar was exporting over 77 million tons of LNG per year. That represented roughly 25% of global supply, not reserves, supply, flow, and flow is what markets respond to. Some analysts argue that Qatar's real power lies not in withholding gas, but in deciding where it goes when demand spikes. In energy markets, allocation is power. The structure of Qatar's contracts reinforced this position. Long-term deals locked in buyers, but many included destination flexibility or renegotiation windows. Spot volumes gave Doha discretion, and Qatar's state-backed producers could absorb volatility that private firms could not. Not speed, endurance. The danger wasn't monopoly. It was indispensability. During Europe's scramble to replace Russian gas, Qatar did not rush to break contracts or flood markets. It negotiated, carefully, patiently, long-term commitments, infrastructure investments, political assurances. This wasn't opportunism, it was strategy. The message was subtle but clear. Flexibility is valuable, but certainty is more valuable. And Qatar could offer both, on its terms. This brings us to the psychological dimension of power. Qatar does not threaten. It doesn't embargo. It doesn't posture militarily. Its leverage operates through calm refusal and controlled supply. In a crisis-driven world, restraint becomes authority, not coercion, choice. Here's what nobody tells you. LNG power grows strongest when others panic. When importers scramble, the supplier that can say no politely sets the rules. And Qatar can say no because its production costs are among the lowest in the world, its reserves enormous, and its balance sheet strong. It doesn't need to maximize today's price. It can optimize tomorrow's position. This is where the pattern begins to echo across history. Small states have always gained influence by controlling critical junctions, ports, canals, trade routes. LNG terminals and tanker routes are the canals of the 21st century. Qatar sits at their intersection. But cracks are visible. As LNG demand grows, competitors emerge. The United States expands exports. Australia scales up. New projects appear in Africa, and energy transition pressures loom. Analysts suggest that Qatar understands this better than anyone. That's why it has embarked on the largest LNG expansion in history, North Field East and North Field South, designed to push capacity past 110 million tons per year. Not defense, preemption. And yet, this expansion carries risk. Oversupply could depress prices. Long-term demand is uncertain. Climate policy accelerates. Everyone thought the future was clear. It isn't. Which brings us to the question that defines the second half of this story. If Qatar's power comes from flexibility, patience, and control over global LNG flows, what happens when the world enters an era of permanent energy crisis, rising competition, and accelerating transition? Because when the system is stressed, the smallest players with the most optionality often become the most powerful. When systems strain, the center of gravity shifts, not toward size. Toward control. Here's what nobody tells you. Qatar's power does not come from how much gas it owns, but from how little it needs to react. In a world addicted to urgency, patience becomes leverage, and as global energy markets enter an era of overlapping crises, that patience is quietly rewriting the rules. Here's why this matters. When everyone else must move, the one who can wait decides the outcome. This is where the mechanism becomes visible. Liquefied natural gas does not behave like oil or pipeline gas. It moves through contracts, not borders, through tankers, not terrain. And Qatar sits at the center of this architecture. Its long-term contracts anchor buyers for decades, while its spot volumes provide optionality during shocks. This dual structure gives Doha something rare: stability without rigidity. Let me show you exactly how this works. When markets tighten, Qatar does not need to chase prices. Buyers come to it. When markets loosen, Qatar does not panic sell. It waits. Its costs are low enough to survive downturns that would bankrupt others. Analysts suggest this positioning allows Qatar to act as a balancer rather than a disruptor. Not a swing producer in the oil sense, but a swing allocator. It doesn't flood markets. It doesn't starve them. It decides where incremental supply goes, and just as importantly, where it doesn't. In tight markets, that distinction is everything. The post-2022 energy crisis made this unmistakable. As Europe scrambled to replace Russian gas, many assumed Qatar would immediately redirect volumes west. Instead, Doha held the line on existing contracts, especially with Asian buyers. This wasn't indifference, it was discipline. Contracts, once broken, destroy credibility, and credibility is the currency of LNG. Some economists argue this stance elevated Qatar's status from supplier to system stabilizer. Not flexible for everyone, reliable for those who commit. This is the psychological trap for importers. In a crisis, they want optionality. Qatar offers certainty, but only at the price of long-term alignment. Countries that hesitated found themselves paying premiums on spot markets. Countries that committed secured stability. The lesson was subtle but sharp. Flexibility belongs to the supplier, not the buyer. Who benefits from this arrangement? In the short term, buyers who can afford long-term contracts gain insulation from volatility. In the medium term, Qatar gains political capital without making threats. In the long term, the structure reshapes alliances. Energy security becomes less about geography and more about contractual trust. But power always attracts challengers. The United States has rapidly expanded LNG exports, driven by private capital and flexible pricing. Australia remains a major supplier. New projects in Africa promise future competition. Some analysts argue this will erode Qatar's dominance. Others counter that scale alone is not enough. U.S. LNG is price-sensitive. Australian projects face cost overruns. African projects face political risk. Qatar's advantage lies in alignment, state backing, low costs, and strategic patience. This is where the pattern repeats. In previous eras, energy power came from owning choke points, canals, pipelines, straits. Today, the choke point is liquefaction capacity combined with shipping control. Qatar has both, and it is expanding them aggressively, betting that even in an energy transition, gas will remain indispensable longer than many expect. But the future is conditional. In one scenario, global gas demand remains strong through the 2030s, driven by Asia's growth and coal-to-gas switching. Qatar's expansion locks in market share. Prices stabilize. Doha becomes the anchor of the LNG system, quiet, central, unavoidable. In another scenario, climate policy accelerates sharply. Demand peaks earlier. Oversupply emerges. Prices fall. Here's the trap. In oversupply, the lowest-cost producer wins. Qatar survives. Higher-cost projects don't. The field clears, leaving Doha stronger even in decline. Not growth, endurance. In a third scenario, geopolitical fragmentation intensifies. Sanctions, trade blocs, and security alliances harden. LNG flows become politicized. Here again, Qatar's neutrality and diplomatic reach become assets. It can sell to many without fully aligning with any, until alignment is required, at which point its choice carries weight. What about the energy transition? Here's what nobody tells you. Transitions are not smooth. They are volatile. They require backup. Gas is that backup. Renewables fluctuate. Storage lags. Grids strain. In this environment, LNG doesn't disappear. It becomes insurance, and insurance is most valuable during stress. This is why Qatar invests not just in production, but in diplomacy, media, finance, and global mediation. Its energy power is embedded in a broader strategy of relevance. When conflicts arise, Doha hosts talks. When markets tighten, Doha fields calls. When systems wobble, Doha waits. Not dominance, centrality. And yet this power has limits. Over-reliance on any supplier creates vulnerability. Importers know this. Diversification continues. New terminals are built, new contracts signed. But diversification does not eliminate hierarchy. It rearranges it. Someone still sits at the top during crisis. And increasingly, that someone is Qatar. Here's the final lesson. In the 20th century, energy power belonged to those who controlled land and pipelines. In the 21st century, it belongs to those who control movement and timing. LNG turned gas into a global commodity. Qatar mastered that transformation earlier and more completely than anyone else. Not size, strategy, not threats, terms, not urgency, patience. Qatar's rise shows that in a fragmented, crisis-prone world, the most powerful actor is not the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who can afford to wait while everyone else scrambles. And as long as energy remains the foundation of modern life, that quiet leverage will matter far more than most people realize.